Hi.
Okay. Let me get out of the, so you guys can see my face for a little bit. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome, class. So we've combined our weekly Wednesday live that we do promptly at this hour every Wednesday. I've been doing this for literally for 5 years. It used to be Monday and then Wednesday for almost last 3 years, I think. So it's okay. Oh, my YouTube is talking back to me. Everybody. Sorry, welcome, guys. Okay, so it means it's working. Okay, and we have this PathtoAV class going on. So we've combined that and we have a fantastic speaker here today. But the fun part is I get to introduce one of my amazing students, and then he's going to do the interview. I've been talking to Kevin for a long, long time. So I'm going to just take a back seat and listen and enjoy. I have a habit of typing notes. So I will call it notes and type Kevin in case you see that scroll coming in. And then when there are questions, you can jump in and answer, or you can do that later. So with that, let me introduce you to Viren. Viren Gujral joined me just recently for this batch of PathtoAV class. He's actually taking the business of autonomous vehicle data class. He's a futurist and he comes with a diverse experience. He's a technology enthusiast, and we share our passion for autonomous vehicle, but he comes with solid experience in robotics and AI. And he has an amazing bunch of extracurricular activities. I've not even caught up to all of that yet, so I'm not going to do justice to that. And I believe he's worked at Honda Motors, he's worked in B2B, e-commerce, and a whole bunch of backgrounds. So with that, I'm going to let me make sure that I make both of you as co-hosts, so you can, let me make permission to share the screen. Okay. Okay. And then if anything goes wrong and I drop off, the show should go on. Just remember. Okay. Okay. With that, let me hand. Is Kevin back?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. So with that, let me hand it to Viren. Viren, you should do justice to your own intro for us for a minute, and then introduce our amazing speaker today.
Emmanuel, I think if you can mute yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Sudha, for giving this opportunity. I'm very Gujaral. I enjoy meeting people, love dancing, but apart from that, I'm a mechanical engineer with a couple of MBAs, and now getting into AI, autonomous vehicles, and robotics. I've worked in logistics environment for last 18 years. So that's where my passion started coming towards the autonomous vehicle. So I'm excited to take Sudha's class and meet great class fellows who are qualified, much qualified, very enthusiastic about the autonomous vehicle space. So welcome everybody. And with that, I'm going to welcome Kevin. Kevin, welcome to the program, and very excited to have you here. And let's get started, and just tell us about how did you get into AV, autonomous space?
Thank you so much, Viren. Yeah, it's awesome to be here, and thank you to Sudha. Yeah, I've been in touch with Sudha now for a while. I think someone recommended one of her books to me, and I read that, really enjoyed it. And then a few weeks after that, out of the blue, Sudha somehow discovered me on LinkedIn and reached out to me. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like this author whose book I just read reached out to me. I was like, oh, so flattered. It was so cool.
I could remember that part of the book. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, how I got into autonomous vehicles, interesting story. I was never a car guy, was never a tech guy, never into robotics or anything like that. In my past life, I was an accountant, worked in accounting and finance. I'm still a licensed CPA in the state of Maryland. Reason I got into this though is because almost 3 years ago, I lost my girlfriend in a car crash. And it wasn't the first time I had to deal with something like that. When I was 12, my mother was also in a fatal crash. Fortunately, my mother survived, but one of her colleagues did not. So I grew up seeing my mother struggle with PTSD as a result of her crash, and then losing my girlfriend to literally the exact same thing. I knew I had to do something. Wasn't quite sure what it was at that time, but a few months after my girlfriend's crash, I was in a class at Georgetown University, McDonough School of Business, on some like new disruptive technologies. And we had a guest speaker come in, Richard Bishop, who's like a trailblazer in the autonomous vehicle space. Worked on it very early on with the government in the 90s and 2000s. Has world-renowned boutique consulting practice on it. Has worked with anyone and everyone in the field. Amazing guy. Comes in to speak to the class about AVs. Decide, oh, I'll send him an email afterwards, tell him my story. Like, hey, I love what you're doing. I don't know anything about AVs, but I think they could save a lot of lives and do a lot of good. So a few weeks go by. Richard reaches out to me and says, hey, why don't we go grab a beer or something? Okay. Go grab a beer with Richard, nice guy, talking about football, music, whatever. Few more weeks go by. I've forgotten about it, kind of moved on. I was trying to like live a normal life again because this was like 6 or 7 months after my girlfriend's crash. I'd switched day jobs because before that I was doing accounting for a hospital, and it just like wasn't a great place for me mentally. So I had to switch and find a new place to work. I started taking a full class load again. I just got back from a big backpacking trip through Spain, which was awesome. And I was just like ready to live a normal life again, try to go back to the way things were. I got an email from Richard. Okay, cool. Then I got an email from Richard asking me to come do work for him. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like I can do work on autonomous vehicles. Like I could, he works specifically more on the business and policy side of AVs. So I was like, wow, I could like have a hand in this. This is incredible. But I've got all this other stuff going on. I don't know how I'm gonna juggle both of them, everything. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait a few days and I'll think of something diplomatic to say to him and like try to like nicely say no. Without even like saying yes or no to him. Like the next day, he just sends me a ton of crap to do. Yeah, that's pretty much, I just thought like, well, someone's got to do this. So that's pretty much been my mentality ever since. And that was early summer 2018, yeah, around now, 2 years ago. And that summer I spent working with Richard. I came in as an outsider, like an accountant trying to understand business and public policy of autonomous vehicles. It's incredibly complex. I soon realized that there was like this huge lack of understanding. There wasn't like a great collaborative network within the industry as well. I wanted to meet everyone I could in the industry. I wanted to meet engineers, developers, lawyers, anyone who could tell me about AVs or robotics. So I reached out to a friend from college, Chris Roberts, lifelong car guy, and also some policy experience as well. And we came up with the idea for the DC Autonomous Vehicles Association. And that will be formed early fall 2018.
I see. So that's interesting story, man. Very interesting. Always, I've heard you that before also because I've attended, talked to you before. Always, it's heart-wrenching as well as motivating that how you have, that got you into AV. And I'm glad you're there. So tell us about the history and what are you doing in DC as far as autonomous vehicles are concerned?
First, thank you so much, Varun. It means a lot. Yeah, DC AVA, it's really incredible how we've grown. So we actually were founded out of a meetup group and hosted our first event with Uber back in the fall of 2018. We were founded with the mission of educating and empowering the public on the benefits of autonomous vehicles. And we do that in two ways. One, by hosting events to bring together the government, industry, public interest, to have honest discussions on the possibilities of AVs. And then we also do active outreach to local government and local business to help them understand how AVs can affect them specifically. Since then, we've grown to just about 300 members. We've done collaborations with Volkswagen, the Washington Auto Show, local startups. We just held our second policy event back in May, where we had speakers from Honda, Daimler, energy lobbyists, and also automotive industry lobbyists. Then we have our next event coming up in about 2 weeks on autonomous trucking. So I'm sure I'll be reaching out to Sudha to help advertise that. But we'd love to have you for that and be part of us as well. We can continue the learning and continue the networking.
Great. Excited about that autonomous trucking. That I think, my personal experience or knowledge, I think that will be the first field which will adopt AV much sooner than the taxis and all. But we'll leave that. That's a personal opinion. Now, the key thing is the topic of today's discussion, primarily that Sudha put us, is non-market strategy. Now, can you please tell us what non-market strategy is?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I'm sure a lot of people here are product managers or marketing managers or want to transition to a role like that. And just about everyone's familiar with traditional market strategy. What are we selling? Like products, widgets, services? How do we advertise? How do we price the product? What channels do we sell things through? Things of that nature. Non-market strategy is your approach to engaging with the broader environment. So that's all stakeholders around you, government, interest groups, activists, the public, and media as well. It consists of the social, political, and legal arrangements that structure these relationships. And sometimes these relationships are formal, but oftentimes they're informal. The non-market world can make or break just about can make or break any business anywhere here in the US. However, I would argue that it's more important for autonomous vehicles than anything else. Not ever before have we trusted computer systems with so much on such like a public-facing scale. It's funny to compare it to other examples from technology. I think like Google, for example, it developed this great search engine and all types of tools and add-ons to be used with it, and made billions upon billions of dollars and amazing success. They did all of that without having to risk anyone's life. And that's really what it comes down to. People really need to feel comfortable trusting their lives with the machine. So that whole break things and keep moving mantra from tech is totally gone. When we roll out these services, we need to have the technology right, we need to have the product right, and we need to have the messaging right. And the only way to do that is by having our market strategies and core values aligned and integrated with how we deal with government, interest groups, and the public at large. So it's easier to think of non-market strategy as how we are advocates of ourselves and our firms and the industry at large to the government, to the media, to the public.
Interesting. So having said that, what can anyone who's looking into getting into industry now do better to understand the non-market environment? What can they do? Say product managers on AV. Tell us something about it.
Great. So yeah, I'll start with product managers, and then also just ideas for anyone else who's new to the industry or wants to broaden their non-market perspective. So in general, though, I would say we need to think beyond tech. You know, we're not selling apps here. We're not selling headphones. product managers need to think differently. We've learned a lot of painful lessons of tech firms coming into the transportation space and having some disasters. You know, look at Uber 7-8 years ago. Like, yes, they spread like wildfire. Yes, Uber is just about in almost every major city now, but the amount of lawsuits, criminal cases, the times they were banned from cities, and all around bad blood they created, it's just, yeah, you can't understate it. It's crazy. I'm sure if you ask people from Uber, would they do things differently? Yeah, they probably say yes. Back then, they would just send out teams into cities, try to, they thought they could win over public and win over drivers just with their product alone, just thought it made so much sense. And in a lot of ways it does, but they came into a lot of clashes with like various interest groups like government and taxi industry and transit industry. Scooters are another example. 3 or 4 years ago, scooters just started popping up on every street corner. But we all know someone who who's had a scooter accident or fallen off, or time scooters have been banned from cities. So the moral of the story is you can't just unveil a new form of transportation in a city and expect things to go smoothly. I've talked a great deal about this with the professors at Georgetown, and we can't think of our product that's going to be more transformative, more disruptive, and I'll say it, as controversial as AVs will be. It might not be today, but at some point in the future as these things start to operate more on broader scales. So really need to understand the political and business climate of the city and states that we're operating in. So what product managers, what they can do, they should align with city and state principles. In DC, we're very progressive, and our city has a list of principles specifically for AVs as they look to attract testing and programs here. There are things like safety, efficiency, and a big one is equity as well. So as product managers look to design their services and tailor their products, then they should be incorporating these elements and specifically be able to address these principles for each city, state that they operate in. So it help them to get more better approval from cities and from stakeholders in the cities, which kind of leads into my next point. This is specifically on a ride-hail delivery service operating in a city. It's important to understand how AVs will augment the bus and subway systems of the cities that they're in. DC, for example, our transit system, buses and subways are pretty good, but in a lot of ways they're not. And we do have some pockets in the city that are known as food deserts, where they don't have access, residents don't have access to good supermarkets. So people that live there end up eating McDonald's, 7-Eleven every night. Rates of obesity, heart disease, diabetes are through the roof compared to other neighborhoods. So it's really sad to see, but I think that's like a great use case if an autonomous delivery or ride-hail service can specifically work to help these neighborhoods. I think they could definitely put together a nice collaboration between city and various supermarkets in the area. You also have the same problem with like people getting access to jobs. You know, DC is probably the worst city in the country for transportation times for hours of commute. So and people should be able to get to their job on time and get to school on time and have that freedom of choice to work where they want, go to school where they want. It also help to build strategic relationships around the community, like have public forums where you not only work to educate the public on AVs or the communities that you're going to operate in, have the public forums to really listen to their needs and understand what their concerns are, and how the communities can benefit from AVs. So I think there's a lot to be learned there. And as for anyone who's looking to get into the AV space right now, I would say to continue to think beyond tech. You know, AVs aren't just tech. It's not just automotive. It's not just transit. It's all of that plus insanely complex engineering problems and policy problems and societal problems as well. So we really need to branch out and broaden our networks here. I don't think anyone in the field right now has the perfect background to fully understand what's all at stake with AVs. Ways to do that: engage with local government. I know DC, Maryland, and Pennsylvania have regular meetings where they have groups from like Department of Transportation, urban planning, come together and talk about AVs in like potential regulations, potential opportunities. So and public can attend, industry can attend. It's a really great learning experience. You get to see how decisions are made. So definitely recommend those. Also engage with various networking groups like the SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers, AUVSI, which I mentioned earlier before we got started. They're an advocacy group for everything unmanned, so mostly drones, but autonomous vehicles also fall into their purview. Then we have like organizations like YPT, Young Professionals in Transportation. There are many great transportation think tanks, like the Shared Use Mobility Center and the ENO Institute. They don't frequently have material out about autonomous vehicles, very much focused on like the here and now of transportation for the Shared Use Mobility Center and the ENO Institute. But it definitely gives you a great view of the transportation issues that are going on today and how insanely complex they are, and how oftentimes it really comes down to like a political issue. There's a lot to be learned. Like, you'll never be bored in this industry. Yeah, never stop learning.
Interesting. I mean, I always thought that it is only national level policies should be looked at, but you are talking about going down deep into where these products will be used. Interesting. I just wanted to ask a question, because one of our classmates asked, can you comment on policies, standards, certifications that affect cloud or edge computing? Now, this is, you talk at a high level, this is coming down at a product management level. Are there any policy, standard certifications from cloud and edge computing, for cloud and edge computing?
It's a tough question. Unfortunately, I don't really have the background to speak to it. Focus more on the operations of AVs. But if someone follows up with me afterwards, whoever question that was, then can try to put you in touch with someone in DC who should know the answer to that.
All right, perfect. No problem. That's what I was expecting. So you have worked so much in autonomous vehicle space now for so many years, and you are privy to so much discussions going on in the industry. What do you think are the obstacles to the adoption of AVs, and how to overcome them?
So there are a lot. Some would say public understanding. That's what Secretary Elaine Chao says, Secretary of the DOT. I agree with that. Some would say the technology, it isn't ready. I would agree with that as well. Some would say federal policy, that we need better policies that could allow for greater testing and more specific direction on what technologies can and can't be used, or how they can be used, things of that. So there's three right there. One I would say, though, that doesn't get enough attention goes back to one of my earlier points about how AVs will interact with the broader transportation system. From like all of my networking and trying to understand the field any way I can. I've come to notice that a lot of folks at local city and state DOTs and city planners don't have a very positive view of autonomous vehicles. It's very much misunderstanding, I believe. A lot of these folks are focused very much on specific types of transportation. You know, they work on like trains or buses or bikes. And they could see AVs as too much of a moonshot, and might see that the city has there are more projects that they could work on that are more like now. They could do like make quicker changes now to make improvements to the transportation system. So it does make me a little bit nervous, but I think that's fairly easy to be addressed. I think both the AV world and the transportation world have a lot to be learned from each other. So I think it is just a lot of like reaching out, the education events, the networking. Yeah, so I think there's definitely opportunity there for us to improve our relationships with the greater transportation world. Yeah, just as an example, like, you know, the city or a mayor might be interested in attracting some AV development to their city, but they might go to their DOT or transit authority and ask them for their opinion. And if the transit authority doesn't have a great shiny opinion of AVs, then they're going to share it with the mayor, and then just the whole project just kind of goes, just falls flat. So we want to get ahead of that and really build this network of collaboration and communication, not only within the AV industry, but the broader transportation ecosystem.
It looks like that means that it will take some time, patience isn't happening right away. Okay, good, great points. Now, so having said that, you understand what are the obstacles and how to overcome. So what are you doing in DCAVA, the association that you have that you are heading? What are you specifically doing to address those issues or overcome those issues? What are you working on now?
Yeah, good question. So what our project for this summer is we want to do a survey of the DC area of residents and their opinions and views of autonomous vehicles. We know that studies have been done on that, have been done on the national scale by PathtoAV, Partners for Autonomous Vehicle Education, and AAA. But we want to take a really localized, granular focus and look at specific neighborhoods, specific stakeholder groups. Yeah, we want to make DC as attractive as possible for autonomous vehicles, and we want the companies that are interested in coming to test and operate here to have that kind of localized knowledge which an association like DCAVA is very uniquely positioned to do, given our experience in the AV world, you know, our history of being very much in the DC focused association. So yeah, it's a lot that can be done there. And we'll reach out to like various stakeholder groups, like pedestrian and cyclist advocacy groups. We think that they're very important and play a very important role in keeping our roads safe. We want to hear what they want to hear and see on AVs. Some of the early testimonials I've heard, no solid data, is that down in Miami, Argo is testing there. Argo is testing in DC as well. Is that cyclists feel more comfortable around the Argo AVs than they do human drivers. So I'd really be curious to see a survey like that out of Miami. But I guess that means we need a Miami Autonomous Vehicle Association to make something like that happen. So yeah, we have the survey. We have some events coming up. Yeah, trying to broaden our collaboration, leverage the network we've established. You know, we're at 300 members right now. We have some fantastic research universities in the area. I'm still a student at Georgetown, but we also have Virginia Tech, who's been an instrumental player in transportation here in the United States. Johns Hopkins as well. We've got a big robotics program. So yeah, I feel like the sky's the limit for a place like DC. And yeah, I guess just for some more background on DC itself, a lot of people might not think of DC as a AV hotbed, but in reality it is. We have Argo, who's been testing here. They're funded by Ford and Volkswagen, of course. And Uber just announced that they'll be testing here in February. Ford is working with Argo, plans to roll out some kind of ride-hail delivery service in the next few years here in DC. We also have Perrone Robotics. They're a shuttle company based in Charlottesville, Virginia, Local Motors in National Harbor, Maryland, and Daimler Trucks down in Southern Virginia. So yeah, it's really incredible all that's going on here, and definitely expect to see more from it, considering all the transportation problems that have been plaguing the city for years.
Interesting, interesting. Absolutely. We all thought that only politicians do some work or do not do any work in these. We will leave that to some other discussion point. Thank you. It's interesting. So on the same topic, something similar, are there any forums, organizations that are working towards consolidation of all the AV related regulations? You know, you talk about there are some guidance being given by the federal government, but states have their own way of doing things. So there was a question which one of our classmates was asking. It was a very appropriate question for our discussion. Can you shed some light on it?
Yeah, so you're right. You know, it is a huge problem in the industry that we essentially have a patchwork of different laws for each state. Yeah, it's very unfortunate because it makes designing these products a little bit harder. You don't know, like some states might require a driver behind the wheel or not, or might require a specific tool or specific testing environment. So it's very hard to design your product and service around that. But you know, we're hopeful that federal legislation will come out soon that will be able to give better guidance. But in the meantime, for researching current state laws, I frequently refer to the National Council of State Legislatures, and I think it's ncsl.org. I think they have a page specifically on autonomous vehicle laws, and I've used that the last 2 years. I have done surveys on AV laws in all 50 states. I haven't done that in a while, probably in over a year. So even I need to refresh for myself on specific laws, but in the past, when I need to research laws, I've looked at that. There are some private companies that I think are looking to build out databases on this as they become more complex and look beyond just the US, look at other international, look at other countries and incorporate that into the database as well. So I think, yeah, that'll be a huge tool. Very excited to see something like that come out. But for the time being in the US, I refer to the NCSL.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that information. Now, you know, we talk about autonomous vehicle, you talk about technology, but technology is changing every day, you know. So how do product managers, you know, take non-market strategy into the whole mix and say, hey, we should work on this thing today, but technology is changing. So how do non-market strategy factors will affect the strategies with the change of technology? How should that?
Oh yeah, so that's a great question. And honestly, the reality of it is, you know, technology changes so fast and society changes so fast. Just look at the events of the last few months, weeks, or days. You know, it's never something that goes away, and it's never something that you really have a complete handle on. So it's just something that you need to really build into your strategies and into your framework, into your core values of really being able to serve the broader public, and being aware of those political and societal issues. You really have to have your finger on the pulse of that at all times. Also, it'll come back to bite you.
I know. I would give in support of that, you know, like you mentioned, that public understanding and of the autonomous vehicle is important. And you also said that AVs need to interact with broader transportation network. And I have seen some amazing technology being developed as a result of that, where companies are looking at what would be the perception of a person of the vehicle coming, or how will the vehicle perceive what will be the action step taken by a passerby who's crossing the lane, or is thinking of crossing the lane, or if a car is parked, whether it will start moving or not. So there is a lot of work being done by the, and in a positive way, they will address the shortcomings of the current technology. So I think you're absolutely correct that we have to keep an eye on what the technology movements are taking place and how non-market strategies can be affected by it. And mostly I would suspect that in a positive way they will affect. All right.
Yeah. Actually, the example you cited about like kind of predicting how pedestrians will act on streets. I don't speak on behalf of any company, but one that I think is really cool is Perceptive Automata out of Boston. They do a lot of those like predictive technologies, and like can kind of tell if this pedestrian is going to run across the street. Is it a kid playing a game or something that's like it's going to dart out in front of the vehicle? Like that's their whole bread and butter. That's what they do. So they're a very cool company to check out, and they have a lot of great material on their website to learn about that.
We actually looked at perceptive automata in our AV data class to look at, you know, understanding beyond just the other objects, but they go to understand to use AI more intelligently, right? To understand the intent of the pedestrian on the road, which is very, very, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I've met with the product manager there, the COO. I don't remember, but yeah, they're awesome. They were at the Washington Auto Show 2 years ago.
So before we open up to questions, sorry, I said, you know, let's talk it out, then we'll open up to the questions. My thing is, what is your personal opinion looking at the state of technology and autonomous vehicles, and so many AV OEMs and other people are involved in this? When will we really see them on the road? What is your personal opinion based on what you're seeing?
Good question. You know, it's something I think about a lot. I would like them here and ready to operate today, but that's just not the case. I really love the perspective of Brian Selesky, a CEO at Argo, formerly at Waymo, but then left and started Argo and been doing phenomenal work. He says he's been very much adamant that it'll be ready when it's ready. It tries really hard not to put a date on it, which I think is awesome. I think that's the way to do it, and just really champion the careful approach that they're taking to testing and designing their vehicles. I've heard that the test to be an Argo test driver is insanely rigorous. I've heard of like professional race drivers struggling with it. Like you need to be one of their test drivers, they'll have like a very complicated course, and like you can't veer at all or any way. So you have to do it like perfectly going forward, and then they'll make you do it the same exact way going backwards.
Wow.
It's like crazy, totally crazy. But no, we're definitely glad to have companies like that in the field. Certainly glad to have companies like that here in DC. Yeah, so big fan of theirs. As far as like specific types of technology, like ride hail or trucking or delivery service, which will be the first to emerge. If you asked me in January 2020, I would have said ride hail and delivery service, specifically ride hail, because in January we had Cruise unveil their origin. We had Uber announce that they are coming to DC, so everything was looking great for that. But then you know, Corona hit. So Corona changes everything. So because of that, I think last mile delivery is already taking off. You know, Neuro and Starship Robotics are in very high demand right now. So excited to see that. Interesting thing about Corona and delivery services, even just like human-driven delivery services. There are some delivery companies that, you know, you place an order for pizza, the restaurant places the pizza, goes out to the front, places the pizza in the trunk of the human-driven delivery car. The human-driven delivery car takes it to your house, and the human driver just presses the trunk, and you go out, get the pizza. So the driver doesn't touch any of it. So you just go out, get the pizza, that's it. That's basically the business model for autonomous delivery. So it's kind of interesting to see how we're introducing people to this new form of delivery service, a new method of delivery service, like where there's no interaction with the delivery person. So I think that could be a positive thing that comes out of this for the delivery world. Trucking has always been a tremendous use case. Very big fan of a lot of the trucking companies out there. You know, your Two Simples, your Embarks, all fantastic. So I think that's a tremendous use case, but in the same way, though, they potentially can come up against greater political and societal friction, because trucking is like a top employer here in the US, depending on how you look at the data. Some will say, yes, it is like the #1 job in the US, like the most common job in the US is a trucker. But like if you cut it a certain way, it's actually entrepreneur. But a lot of truckers are entrepreneurs because they drive for themselves. They don't drive for like a large carrier. But anyway, so trucking is obviously very important here in the US as a job. So it will be interesting to see how the industry comes together to address that. The policy folks from those companies like Too Simple, Embark, Peloton, Plus AI. It's really interesting to see because, like, in terms of technology, they're very much competitors, and you know, it's for them, you know, it's a race for development and to get those strategic partnerships. But their policy teams work together frequently, and they're awesome to be around, awesome teams. So we've done a lot with them at the DCAVA, going to their happy hours. We're going to have some of them speak at our trucking event in later this month. So it is really cool to see that kind of collaboration and joint effort from the industry to work together and help establish like that positive messaging to government and to the public.
Interesting. That's quite a number of things you covered. Thanks for your insights. It's I really appreciate it. With that, you know, I'm going to open up. Sudha, if you have been compiling all the questions. If you don't mind, if there are any questions and what are the questions, let's ask Kevin.
So there is a question from Quenzuelo about voice, whether there is regulation of voice data in the car.
Wise data? Sorry?
Voice, yeah.
Voice
data.
Yeah.
Oh,
data throws it off. Basically, all of them have voice, right? Like Amazon Alexa, or they have the Alexa Auto in the car. It's still in the tech realm. We are excited about it as tech. But what is the policy world thinking about it?
Yeah, I don't believe there's anything specific right now. I think it's not just voice too. I think driver monitoring yeah, there's a lot of data to be collected there. So I see them kind of like in the same vein, the voice part from the vehicle, as you taught to do certain things, and then also the driver monitoring. As these driver monitoring systems are like, meant as safety features, meant to make sure that you're paying attention. If you have like a high level 2 autonomous vehicle, it might be trying to make sure you're paying attention or engaging with the wheel every so often. Ultimately, they're safety features. But yeah, I don't think that there's any specific regulation, but that is a huge debate though. You're right. Like how, and for all of tech, really, I'm sure our phones are listening to all of us now, and I'll see advertisements when I go onto Facebook or Twitter or whatever, based on things that I'm saying or texting. So it's a problem across tech. In the vehicle, though, I think it's a very interesting use case because, as I was mentioning, to the driver monitoring systems and the data collection. So those are great features to have in a car, but they're also very, very expensive and add to the overall price of the vehicle. I think these are things that are necessary to have in a vehicle, especially driver monitoring, and especially as cars become like reach higher levels of autonomy and the level 2 systems get better. Yeah, so I think it's a big debate, but I think that they should be allowed to do like the types of data collection and sharing, because ultimately, if it could lower the costs of these safety features and these convenience features for drivers, then I think that's a win. So at the end of the day, there are a lot of accidents because of driver accidents and distractions. So if we can try to eliminate that, then I think that's something we should definitely have in our vehicles, and should definitely be the main argument for having them in our vehicles.
Thank you, Kevin. Queenswello actually is my student from another course, which is also part of the PathtoAV series called AIX, where we look at how do you design experiences in the car and intra-car. You said how there is collaboration between the city and the AV world. So the V2X and all that experience piece with designers. She's a designer. She's an AI designer focused on voice and AR. So I think she's coming at it from the voice as an experience. Is there any regulation? So it looks like there is a broader data regulation, which is still not mature enough, is what I think.
Yeah, the CTA, the Consumer Technology Association, they do a lot of work around that. I believe it's CTA, because they touch all of technology.
Okay, so, Hani had some comment before about asking about when will we get to autonomous taxis, and he comes from Dubai, so his answer might be different from ours.
Yeah, I was very, like I was saying before, I was very hopeful of them coming very soon, but because of Corona, I think everything in transportation, rideshare, mass transit, it's all going to take a hit. And definitely talking to people around the industry, in the transportation industry, the people who work on like mass transit buses and trains are very scared because, taking shared transportation creates a potential for spreading the virus. And we're also likely going to see a societal shift as working from home becomes more acceptable and more commonplace. So it's definitely something everyone in the industry, not just the AV world, but the broader transportation space is looking at very closely. So I was really hopeful to have them soon. I don't know. I definitely think that the last mile delivery and trucking are, we'll see them before the rideshare and ride hail. Some other like less sexy use cases of AVs that could be come very soon. Things like bus yards and truck yards. A mass truck yard, as many containers. I'm sure Viren can tell you all about that, and it could be very hard to manipulate all of those containers. So I think that's like a low-hanging fruit for autonomous vehicles, because it's a closed facility. There's no people around. It could even, if they wanted to, they can even connect it to the localized Wi-Fi. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities, even though ride hail, ride share, or personal ownership of an AV seems the sexiest. There are a lot of other opportunities for AVs there right now.
So we've seen recent news, Kevin, about lot of trucking, not even trucking option, delivery options. A lot of companies moving to cargo delivery. Do you seeing that? Do you see a policy discussion brewing around that?
Yeah, I would bet there is those discussions going on right now, and using China as an example of that, because in China, very soon after like things start to shut down, the Chinese government paved the way for like being able to operate autonomous vehicles on these empty roadways and deliver goods. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that's being worked on right now behind closed doors, but we'll see what happens. It's interesting, you know, going into this year, it being an election year, I wasn't very hopeful of many changes getting done for federal change on the AV world. But I don't know, you know, Corona changed everything. There's also a lot of other societal issues going on right now. But yeah, I could see that like a delivery service, like use case being pushed forward because of using China as an example and how it's working for them. I'm definitely seeing some companies trying to pivot into that to varying degrees of success. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. So
Emmanuel has a question on, I'm just going to read it out as it is. Do you feel that the federal government is for or against AV? Is AV being used politically?
Oof, great question. Overall, it's a very, I don't know, it's a tough question to answer because there is definitely support for and against it on both sides of the aisle, on both the Democrats and Republicans. It does have the potential for it to be this great bipartisan effort, because there's definitely interest from both Democrats and Republicans for varying reasons. It's not super political now, but I think it definitely will be. You know, there'll be a lot of questions around loss of jobs. It's not going to be like a sweeping change to like the job world, just as these things are deployed. I think it's going to be a gradual, slow, gradual process over the next 10, 15 years. And it's only going to affect, specifically in the trucking world, the long-term routes. So yeah, not political yet, definitely has the potential. Federal government, it's hard to say because both parties have reasons to be for and against it, but it's not super political yet. And just it being an election year, they're definitely hesitant to, they could just be hesitant to take something up like this.
So yesterday we had this AV masterclass, and David Kerrigan is actually here. He's the teacher. He spoke about regulation, global regulation around the world. And he said in US, we had the self-drive law that passed in the House, but then it was called the AV START law, and it stalled in the Senate. Mm-hmm. Is it focused, was trucking the contentious point where they didn't agree on a bipartisan way?
I believe that was one of them. Yeah, that was one of the older bills. So I think what's been worked on more recently is to kind of leave trucking out for now, because that does appear to be the most contentious part of it. There are also some other issues involved, like the AAJ, the Association of American Justice. I think they represent trial lawyers. They are against AVs, generally against AVs. But yeah, so the various things just getting added on and added on. So I think the lobby effort for AVs is learning from that and trying to strengthen and streamline anything that we put forward on that. We've done some work in the AV space, some work in the federal space on that, the DCAVA has, but it's not one of our focuses now, because if you're not familiar with it, it's there's already a lot of cooks in the kitchen The history of it is the history of the automotive lobby was there were two main lobby groups, Global and the Alliance. And they differed from each other, I think, like based on trade issues, but they both represented all the major OEMs. Just this past year, both of those groups merged into one. So it's been a little bit crowded to begin with. They just merged into one, which is awesome. But then every OEM, every tech company in the space now has their own team on this as well. So yeah, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of like in-depth research going on into it too. A lot of sophisticated research, like coming at it from like a transportation planner perspective, coming at it from an economist perspective, coming at it from a safety perspective. So there's a lot of ways to talk about this and to champion the benefits of AVs.
Interesting.
One question I had, Kevin, where do you see from geography perspective that they are favorable to AVs? Any particular hotspots in the country that you see?
Yeah. So in the Southwest, they have the favorable climate. They don't have to worry about rain. So I think that's why we saw it like clump up there for a while. But it's great to see some companies branch out beyond that and trying to learn from different types of climates, different types of environments. And I always use Argo as an example, just because I'm most familiar with Argo because they've been in DC for the longest out of anyone. So, excuse me, they test in DC, Miami, Austin, Texas, I believe Pittsburgh, and somewhere around Detroit as well. But with all those diverse areas, you get a diverse range of climates. In Miami, it'll just rain at the drop of a hat. DC, yeah, crazy humidity, also bad rainstorms. And I've also heard that they're finding like pedestrian behaviors and driver behaviors very different. They're seeing them like very differently as they vary from city to city. And I think an AV is like the most uniquely positioned to capture all the nuances of pedestrian behavior and driver behavior. So I'd be really curious to see what comes out of data from that, if there'll be any like research studies or like announcements around that. But yeah, so it's congregated in favorable climates, starting to see some of them branch out now. Yeah, so I'd like to see done in more places to get that type of data on varying climates and varying driver behavior, varying pedestrian behavior.
So we're almost near the end of the hour. There is one last question from a student. Are you aware of any part-time or skills-based opportunity to volunteer in this space?
Good question. I'm sure they're out there. It depends on what you're looking for. It seems like there are a ton of jobs in the engineering and the data side of it. The business side of things, the business model is still really being developed. So you do have to get a little bit creative as to how you approach that. And I would say, I would love to see more organizations like the DCAVA pop up. So I would love to see a Miami Autonomous Vehicle Association, or Dubai Autonomous Vehicle Association, or Philadelphia. Yeah, because it really gives you that front row seat to see how changes are made within the local government, how companies engage with them, how companies plan to operate in this field. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough, and it helps you to strengthen your professional network. And yeah, this has been like the best thing. So definitely recommend it. And if you want to do that, you want to form an autonomous vehicle association, please reach out to me. Happy to be a mentor, tell you some things that worked well for us, some things that didn't. I've helped out people before.
So Kevin, are you planning to have chapters of DCAVA?
I think it would be great to have a national network of something like this, like that does take more of an aggressive approach to educating folks, and also like working with local government and local business. We have PathtoAV, which is the Partners for Autonomous Vehicle Education. They're awesome, but they only focus on the education piece and bringing people together around that. But by having an association like this, it gives you the opportunity to do that more active outreach and talk about specific plans. So we've been able to present DC city government and various local businesses on how AVs can affect them and work with them on their business plans on how they see AVs fitting in with them. So yeah, it's been a tremendous learning experience, and we've benefited from it, and we know that they've been our customers, if you will, have benefited from it as well. So it's really great. Can't recommend it enough. If you want to get in touch with us, we're on Twitter, DC at DC Autonomous. Follow us on LinkedIn, DC Autonomous Vehicle Association. Don't hesitate to reach out to me either. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
That was my question, whether the students can connect with you. So the class recording will be, sitting in our class archive, and we can share with you if you want to share with a broader audience. This has been fantastic. So one of the promises of this whole PathtoAV course series is, instead of just taking one more online course, we want students to get the networking, which, I was typing with just the names of various associations that you were giving. So I'm going to follow up to make sure that we have a collective list of references that you gave. And the other thing is, our students are hungry. They're all professionals working in different jobs, and they're hungry to get real experience. And so that's where this is coming from. Can we volunteer? Can we do other things? So I'm going to follow up offline, because I want to find opportunities for my students to maybe participate in that research that you're working on.
Great.
Or
Okay.
if you're going and, into some meetings with any of the groups or, local government as part of the DC AVA, maybe there's a small project one of my students can take on, so I'm happy to follow up offline.
Well, thank you so much, Sudha.
Awesome.
Thank you, Varind.
Thank you so much. Varind, fantastic job. And I love it. And I can sit and listen in as a student instead of doing the talking. So this was good. And thank you so much, Kevin, for finding the time and everything you do. It's such an inspiration. Thank you so much, everybody. So with that, we should wrap up. Good?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take
Okay.
care.
And thanks. Bye.
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 I'm going to stop the recording here. Let me make sure that the YouTube is all right before I switch that off.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. Okay, you'll hear my voice again. Sorry. With that, let me introduce you to. Oh God. Okay. I'm not sure how much of the YouTube has come. Still talking. Okay, it's going on. It's fine.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Something that goes down right.
Okay.
Geography.
Volunteer. Hold on. In the space. Okay, it's coming through properly. That's awesome. I'm happy.
Have benefited from it as well.
Okay, good. So we're good. Then I'm going to stop the live stream. Also.